Ever get that feeling someone's saying one thing but maybe meaning something else entirely?
Oh, definitely. We've all been there, haven't we? Where the words just don't seem to match the vibe, maybe.
Exactly. So today we're doing a deep dive into Patrick King's Read People Like a Book. Not about mind reading, obviously.
No, no, not at all. It's more about practical skills, isn't it? Learning to observe better.
Right. Getting those tools to understand behavior, nonverbal stuff, and just connect better with people.
Basically, learning to read the room, or rather, the person in front of you.
Okay, so let's unpack this. How do we actually start seeing more?
Well, what's really interesting, and King makes this clear, is how much we miss because we're just listening to the
Right,
words.
we focus purely on the verbal.
Exactly. But so much communication is happening non-verbally. And the good news is reading people isn't some, magic trick. It's a skill you can learn.
A skill based on observation.
Observation and logical thinking, tuning into those signals that are often pretty subtle.
Okay, so we want to tune in, like, we're step one. How do we start decoding?
The absolute bedrock, according to King, is getting what he calls a baseline.
A baseline. Okay, what does that mean in practice?
Think of it like learning someone's personal normal, their default settings. How do they usually talk? Their typical tone?
Their gestures, how much eye contact they normally make.
Precisely. Even little things like do they fidget normally? What's their standard way of being? Because you can't spot something unusual.
Unless you know what usual looks like for them. Makes sense.
Exactly. You need that reference point for that specific individual.
Can you give us an example, like maybe from an office setting or something?
Sure. Imagine you have a colleague, let's call her Sarah. Normally, she's really high energy, talks fast, hands moving all the time. That's her baseline.
Okay, got it. Energetic Sarah.
Right. Now, if she walks into a meeting one day and she's really quiet, speaking slowly, barely moving, that's a shift.
A deviation from her baseline.
Yeah. It doesn't automatically mean she's lying or upset, but it tells you something is different for her.
And compared to someone else.
Well, maybe Mark in the next cubicle is usually very quiet and reserved. If Sarah is quiet, it's a change for her. If Mark is suddenly loud and pacing, that's a change for him.
Ah, so it's totally personalized. You can't just say quiet means sad for everyone.
You absolutely cannot. That's a huge mistake people make. And finding this baseline, it's not a quick glance.
It takes time.
It takes observing them over time and, crucially, in different situations. How are they when relaxed, stressed, happy, concentrating?
So you see the range.
You see their range. Without that, you might think Mark's quietness is him being uninterested in your project, when really that's just Mark.
Or Sarah's fidgeting is nervousness about a topic, when maybe she just always fidgets a bit.
Exactly. Misinterpretations happen easily without establishing that baseline first.
Okay, baseline established. We know what normal looks like for someone. What nonverbal signals should we be paying attention to next?
Right. Now we get into the specifics. King breaks it down well. Let's start with the head and face.
Okay. Eyes? Smiles?
Eyes are huge. Too little eye contact might mean shyness, discomfort, sometimes deception, but be careful there.
And too much.
Too much can feel, well, intense, maybe aggressive even. Also, notice where they look when they're thinking. Looking away briefly is normal processing for many. Constant avoidance is different.
And smiles. I know there are different kinds.
Yes. The genuine happy smile, often called a Duchenne smile, involves the eye muscles. You see the crinkles around the eyes?
What's smizing?
Kind of, yeah. A polite or forced smile, often just the mouth is involved, it doesn't quite reach the eyes.
What about head movements? Nods, tilts.
Simple nods usually mean agreement, right? But a head tilt often shows curiosity, someone considering what you're saying.
Okay, and you mentioned something, micro expressions.
Ah, yes. These are fascinating. Super fast, like split-second facial expressions. They can flash an emotion. Someone's trying to hide anger, fear, disgust.
Blink and you miss it, literally.
Pretty much. You might not consciously catch it, but it can contribute to that gut feeling you sometimes get.
Interesting. Okay, moving down from the face. What about the torso, our posture?
Our core body language speaks volumes. Think about open versus closed posture.
Like arms crossed versus arms open.
Generally, yes. Open posture, arms uncrossed, body facing you often suggests openness, feeling comfortable. Closed posture, arms crossed, maybe turned away slightly, can be defensive, uncomfortable, like a barrier.
Makes sense. What about leaning?
Leaning in towards someone usually shows interest, engagement. Leaning away suggests the opposite, disinterest, wanting distance.
Okay. And shoulders. A shrug.
Even shrugs have nuances. A full, relaxed, two-shoulder shrug. Probably genuine uncertainty, I don't know.
Like a little half shrug.
A quick, maybe one-sided shrug, that could indicate indifference or maybe even that they don't quite believe what they're saying themselves. It's subtle.
You know, the crossed arms thing. I do that when I'm cold sometimes.
Exactly, and that's why context is so vital, which we keep coming back to. It's never just one cue in isolation.
Right. So what about arms and hands? They seem pretty expressive.
They really are. Think about hand gestures when someone's talking. Are they big, open gestures? That often goes with confidence.
Yeah.
Small, hesitant gestures, maybe uncertainty.
What about that thing people do, touching their fingertips together?
Ah, steepling. Yeah, that's often linked to confidence, feeling thoughtful or in control.
And hiding hands. Pockets. Behind the back.
Can sometimes suggest nervousness or like they're holding something back, yeah. And of course, fidgeting, tapping fingers, playing with the pen.
Nerves. Boredom.
Could be anxiety, boredom, just excess energy. You need to compare it to their baseline fidget level. And also look for self-soothing gestures.
Like rubbing their neck or arm.
Exactly. Touching the face, neck, arms. These can be unconscious ways we try to calm ourselves down when stressed or uncomfortable.
Okay. What about legs and feet? Are they telling tales too?
They can be surprisingly revealing. They're often less consciously controlled. Foot tapping, like finger tapping, can be impatience or nerves.
And where they're pointing.
Yes. Notice the direction someone's feet or even knees are pointing, especially when seated. Often they'll point towards an exit if they want to leave or towards the person they're most interested in.
Oh, never thought about that. Leg crossing.
Leg crossing is tricky. It depends so much on comfort, habit, furniture. I wouldn't read too much into that one alone. Again, look for clusters.
Got it. And you mentioned proxemics earlier, our use of space.
Right, personal space. How close someone stands or sits to you. Too close can feel like a power play, maybe aggressive or just unaware.
Too far.
Can signal formality, maybe discomfort, dislike, or just a cultural norm.
Ah, cultural differences. That must be huge here.
Absolutely critical. Personal space bubbles vary massively around the world. Eye contact norms, gestures, you have to factor in culture.
So it really is like detective work, gathering all these clues.
It is. And the key skill, King really emphasizes this, is looking for clusters. Multiple signals pointing in the same direction.
Not just one isolated gesture.
Never just one gesture. One crossed arm could be anything. Crossed arms, plus a tight jaw, plus leaning away, plus avoiding eye contact during a difficult conversation. That cluster tells a much stronger story, probably defensiveness or disagreement.
Right. Look for the pattern, the whole picture. Okay, so we've covered a lot of nonverbal stuff. But what about the words themselves and how they're said?
Absolutely crucial. Verbal cues add another whole layer. First, think about the content.
The actual words they choose.
Yeah. Are they formal or informal? Positive language or negative? How often do they use I versus we? Lots of I might suggest self-focus. More we could mean collaboration.
Interesting. What else about content?
Pay attention to the topics they bring up. And maybe even more importantly, the topics they seem to actively avoid.
Ooh, omissions. What's not being said?
Exactly. Sometimes the silence or the sidestepping is louder than words.
Powerful point. And the way they speak, tone, speed, all that.
Yes, that's called paralanguage. All the nonverbal elements of speech. Tone is huge. Warm, cold, sarcastic, anxious, confident. It colors the meaning completely.
Pitch too.
Definitely. Rising pitch at the end of a sentence can sound like a question, show uncertainty. Falling pitch usually sounds more certain. Final.
Volume.
Pace. Volume can show dominance if loud, or maybe shyness if quiet. Pace talking fast could be excitement. Nerves. Slow could be thoughtfulness or boredom. You need context and the baseline.
What about pauses and fillers like, and
Pauses can be natural thinking moments, or they can feel really awkward, tense.
Yeah.
And those fillers disfluencies often increase when someone's nervous, unsure, or maybe searching for the right words, perhaps trying to deceive. But again, be cautious.
Are there specific word patterns or phrases that King says might be revealing linguistic tells?
He does highlight a few interesting ones, like over-explaining something simple. Sometimes that can indicate insecurity or maybe that the explanation isn't quite solid.
Yeah, trying too hard.
Could be. Defensive language is another potential flag, especially if it seems out of proportion.
Okay.
Qualifiers, words like maybe, sort of, I guess, kind of. Using a lot of these can signal a lack of commitment or certainty, non-committal language in general.
Avoiding taking a stand.
Right, and definitely watch out for evasiveness. If you ask a direct question and they change the subject or give a really vague answer, that's noteworthy.
Wow, okay. This adds a whole new dimension to just listening. Now,
Hmm.
the big one,
Hmm.
deception, lying. Is there a secret code? Can we really tell?
Ah, the million-dollar question. And the short answer, according to King and most experts, is no. There's no Pinocchio's nose, no single guaranteed sign someone is lying.
So all that stuff in movies,
Yeah.
the sweaty palms, the shifty eyes.
Mostly myth, or at least vast oversimplification. Real life is way more complex, but
Okay.
by understanding their baseline and looking for deviations, those clusters of cues again, you can become more sensitive to inconsistencies that might indicate something's not right.
So it always comes back to that baseline, doesn't it?
Always. A significant change in their behavior, verbal or nonverbal, when a specific, perhaps difficult topic comes up, that's worth paying attention to.
What kind of clusters are sometimes linked to deception? With a big emphasis on sometimes.
Exactly. Big emphasis. Things like inconsistencies. Maybe their words say yes, but their head shakes no. Or their story changes slightly each time they tell it.
Okay. What?
That they give way too much detail about unimportant things but get really vague on the key points. Or the opposite, suddenly very clipped.
Changes in detail level.
Right, maybe an increase in fidgeting or those self-soothing gestures we talked about. Changes in eye contact could be less than usual or it could be more, like an overcompensation, trying too hard to look sincere.
That's counterintuitive.
It can be. Also, more defensive body language barriers up, maybe angling away, and vocal changes, pitch might go up, speed might change, more hesitation, more ums and ahs, maybe more speech errors.
And this seems critical. These could all just mean someone's nervous or uncomfortable, right? Not necessarily lying.
Absolutely critical point. Stress, anxiety, fear of being disbelieved, just feeling awkward, all these can produce the exact same signal.
So jumping to liar is dangerous.
Incredibly dangerous. You need to consider the context, the stakes, gather more information if possible. A false accusation can destroy trust. The goal isn't to be suspicious of everyone.
It's more about being discerning, noticing when things don't quite add up.
Precisely. It's about noticing anomalies that might prompt you to ask more questions, perhaps clarify things, rather than making an accusation. It's about better understanding, not judgment.
Okay, that's a really important clarification. So we've looked at immediate cues. King also talks about spotting longer-term patterns and understanding motivations, right?
Yes, moving beyond the snapshot moment. Observing someone consistently over time can reveal personality traits. Like, someone who always needs to have the last word might have a stronger need for control, perhaps.
Or someone who constantly agrees with everyone.
Might be driven by a high need for approval. King suggests thinking about underlying motivations, common human drives. Need for approval, control, security, achievement, connection, even novelty.
How do we figure those out?
By observing long term. How do they react in different situations? What goals do they talk about? What seems to scare them or make them defensive? It helps build a deeper, more nuanced picture.
Like, someone obsessed with status symbols might be driven by achievement or maybe insecurity.
Could be either or both. It helps you understand the why behind their actions beyond just the what. But again, carefully. This is about insight, not slapping labels on people.
Right. Nuance, not stereotypes. And throughout this whole discussion, we keep mentioning context. Let's really nail that down.
It's arguably the most important piece. No single cue means anything definitive on its own. Zero.
It's like trying to understand a word ripped out of a sentence.
Perfect analogy. You need the whole sentence, the whole paragraph, the whole situation. Always interpret cues within their context. Is the room cold? Is the person naturally shy? Is there a huge cultural difference in play?
We talked about culture with space and eye contact.
Huge variations. Gestures mean different things. Emotional expression norms differ. You have to be mindful of that. And just individual personality, their history, their mood that day.
So many variables.
Which is why you need that holistic view.
Yeah.
Look for clusters, check if they align with the situation, and always, always ask yourself,
What else can this mean?
exactly. Be curious, be empathetic, keep an open mind, become a sophisticated observer, not just someone looking for quick tells.
Okay, this is incredibly powerful stuff, but it feels like a lot to take in. How do we actually start using this, tomorrow?
Start small, make it manageable. King suggests just picking one place, one time, to practice active observation.
Like at a coffee shop or watching people in a meeting.
Perfect examples. Or even watching characters on TV initially without sound, just observing their nonverbals. Focus